How I go through drawing those maps for the middle layer of our planet that we have been building in this series. And this is the middle layer has got a little bit more continental space. So unlike previously where I zoomed in to create my islands, I'm going to sort of chalk them out, if you like, as larger pieces. So I want to have an extreme north space up here. We've got lots more to fill in than we did before, because this is going to be the bigger area, if you like. Now what I'm doing here, unlike the previous one where I was focusing on the outline, here I'm just drawing the general shape that I want for these land masses, and I'm going to go in and tweak the shapes and give them a bit of a better definition, bit of better edging, just to make it feel a bit better. I might split up some of these as well, to make them feel more like they're shattered spaces. Now, although the map that I drew of a cross-section through the planet had multiple layers of each of these different biomes, what I'm going to tell my players is that this map does not represent them all on the same plane. So this landmass might be lower or higher than this one, depending, and they must just accept that. And it's not going to pose a huge amount of risk when they have to move from one area to another. They're going to have to use one of those Bolovian sky walls or a teleportation circle or whatever device they happen to have access to. They're going to need to use that anyway. So it's really, from a mechanical perspective, irrelevant as to the different heights and layers. Artistically, it might be quite nice to do, but I don't have the skill to do that, I don't think. All right, so there's my rough layout of my continents. I'm now quite happy with that. I think it's quite different from the previous one, which was definitely more fractured and smaller. So now we're going to go in and we're going to clean these things up. So we zoom in to 300%. That's where I'm working on all my maps. It's important to keep scale the same across the board, so that when we do eventually overlay the maps on top of each other, they make sense. So here we go, smaller brush, just giving us the option to make these sort of edges make more interesting geography, if you like. And we'll do that. And then you get a little island, and you get a little island, and you get a little island. Now, one of the things that I was thinking about, I know I said I wasn't going to talk very much in this video, but well, it's me, was the fact that some of these islands might actually have gigantic chains linking them together. Because if I was a territorial warlord, I think that might very well be something that I might do. Instead of letting my islands float away from each other, let's link them with these giant chains. I think that could be quite interesting, especially from a dramatic perspective. Again, narrative being my focus, is we can now go, well, what happens if someone starts to cut those chains while the players are on the chains? Or maybe it's the players who are cutting the chains. Maybe they're trying to change a political power. I think that could be quite interesting. So I'm going to, on this level anyway, I think the elves above, there's not a lot of islands out there, and the ones that are out there, you don't really need to chain around. They're going to drift away and come back again in their own time. I think that doesn't necessitate chains, but I think here, just to keep it interesting, and just to give us a little bit of an adventure hook, I'm going to do that, and see where that sort of takes the narrative. If anything, that's the other thing, is that a lot of this stuff one plans for, and then you realize that, oh, we're actually never going to use that, or it isn't going to be used. Again, that's not a problem. It's about minimizing the amount of stuff that doesn't get used, maximizing the amount of stuff that does get used, and then making sure the stuff that is available for use is interesting to use. And it's not just sort of humdrum, the same old. And then on the same in the same breath almost, is to make sure that it's not so disparate, it's not so different from what one expects that one can't access it. Because that's also a real risk, is that we create these fantastical spaces that are so different from what we expect that they're really just not something that we can grasp, and as a result we get alienated from it because we don't understand it, and we don't want that to happen either, because that's the exact opposite, as a matter of fact, of what we're going for, isn't it? We're going for a collaboratively created narrative, a story, a role-playing experience that everyone can participate in, not just you, the GM, as the creator of this amazing space. Yes, it might be amazing to you, but if no one else experiences it, well, it's that whole tree falling over in the forest type of thing. You don't want that. You don't want that to happen to your campaign. All this work, all this effort to be wasted on something as silly as having over prepared, I think would be very sad. So now we start to get to the point where we say, right, what are the races that are going to be in this space? And when we were speaking about the elves up north in the solar sphere, let's call it the solar sphere. It's closest to the sun, Solari. So the solar sphere. So in the solar sphere, we've got the elves, and then we weren't sure about lizard folk or Yuan-Ti, those sort of serpent-like beings. The question is, what do we have down here? We've got these dense jungles. That's what we're going to anticipate anyway. We've got these aquatic environments. This is not your traditional fantasy setting where you're going to have knights in plate armor riding around on gallant steeds. You might have that maybe in one or two areas, but the majority of the space, I want to feel like it's a primeval space, almost a space that is dangerous and humid, and there's always rain dripping from the mountains of the islands floating above you. So I think we're going to have, I don't want to have more lizard folk. It seems like we've got lizard folk everywhere. So maybe the elves need to have the orcs, and maybe the orcs need to be desert orcs. That to me, kind of, we were speaking about Mad Max as a sort of a source of inspiration. I could see orcs doing that a lot better than I could see lizard folk doing that. The lizard folk I'll save for down here in these jungles and things. That to me makes more sense. We've got a sort of an Aztec vibe. I think that's, that is the interesting thing, is that often one has to look at the expectations, and you say lizard folk jungle, and I struggle, I really do, and maybe it is something that I should challenge myself on, but I don't think it needs to be here, is I need to see lizard folk as something other than Aztecian, shamanistic types of beings. That's all I can see when I think lizard folk jungle, is Aztec, Incan, or not really Incan, it's Aztec Mayan type of cultural base. That's sort of what I think of when I think of them. And I advocate that that's not a bad thing, because my players, if I say, you see this, it's very Aztec-like temples, stepped pyramid, my players immediately have got a visual in their head that doesn't take a huge amount of explanation. I can talk about the horrific facial statues and relief carvings on the side of it, and they're going to have in their heads the ideas that we get from places like Tenochtitlan and the actual environments that exist here in real Earth. That's an instantaneous connection that they wouldn't have normally. I need to think about it and say, well, how do I tweak it up to this lizard-like folk, this being, these creatures? And I wonder if they shouldn't be united by a common theocratic idea of perhaps sacrificing something to the gods. Now, of course, the Aztecs were quite happy to cut out the hearts of their enemies, and given the nature of the campaign that the setting that I'm creating here is all about that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and have a look at that video. It's a special event creating a campaign where we talk about a heart as being central to the campaign. It could be an interesting link that these Aztec-like beings, these lizard folk, are trying to rip out hearts to see if they could find the heart that's been lost. And yet they've been doing it in the wrong time. They've been doing it for millennia, because that's what their holy scriptures say will be the end of the world. So that's an interesting tie-in, isn't it? I think it's an interesting tie-in anyway. So I think I'm going to do that to just sort of tie in that theme again, that they've been persevering for millennia to bring back the heart of to find the heart anyway of the god that's going to lose it. Everyone else thinks they're just bonkers, and then the actual campaign is the fact that they've got to try and find the heart of the god and bring it back to prevent oblivion. I quite like that, actually. I must admit. I think that works quite well. All right, so we're not also just going to have lizard folk and, say, humans living on these islands. I think that would be a little bit limiting in terms of narrative. That would feel like that awful Mass Effect Andromeda, where we've only got 3 races because we didn't want to spend any time developing more. Type of scenario. Let's just not go there. So we will have more than just humans. A lot of people like to play different races. Most people play humans, but there are a lot of people who like different races. So we need to give those to them. We need to work them into this space. Now, a race that I think starts to have some interesting practical questions is the dwarves. How deep does your mine run? Well, it runs to the bottom of our island, and then we fell through to the next one down below because we dug too deep. Brings a whole new meaning to too deep, too far. So what do the dwarves do? We know that the gold is in the deserts above us. Dwarves could go up there, I suppose, and you'd probably have dwarvish prospectors up there looking at the potentials of mining gold. And yes, it's a stereotype, absolutely, and I will keep to it for this instance anyway. So they could potentially be looking for gold up there, but down here, what are they going to be doing? I think they're going to have changed their focus. Now, this is a hot, humid environment, so there's lots of water about. There's lots of nasty, sort of bitey, midgy, manky bugs and things that'll swarm around and make your life miserable. So what would the dwarves be doing? What would the dwarves do here? What niche would they find themselves in? And I wonder if they wouldn't become ice miners, where the tops of these bigger continents, these bigger land masses, are going to have ice. They're going to have ice on them. And if the dwarves can get in there and they can mine that ice, then they can bring that down to the lower plains, where it will be purchased for keeping food safe and healthy. So I think that's a big potential space for the dwarves to be in. So the dwarves will be these ice miners. And I do like that idea, because it creates, again, we still have dwarves, they're still mining, but they're no longer interested in gold. Now they're interested in ice. And it just, for me, it's about making a world that feels like it's been here for a long time, and that the people that are here have adjusted to that. space, and I think that that does that for me in terms of dwarves. Gnomes, I've never really been a huge fan of gnomes anyway, to be honest with you. I have issues with really small races anyway, in fantasy and in science fiction, because I think that they would struggle tremendously to move around. And if you think about the challenges that people in our own society have with moving around, with parking, if you're physically disabled, it's a challenge in some countries. In other countries it's not, but even so, that still causes strife. But now you have to access old buildings and there's stairs there suddenly, or you can't build a new building without taking into account halfling door handle heights. It creates a space that I think would be very difficult for people to operate in. And it's complicating. It's complicated matters as far as I'm concerned. So either you just blatantly ignore it and you assume that the halfling and the gnome and everyone can just reach everything without issue, or you make it an issue and then it becomes frustrating to the player. That's the point that I was sort of waffling at. All right, I'm happy with these land masses. I'm now going to go through the usual procedure, which is mountains, mountains, mountains. These mountains, of course, will be slightly different. Not that they will be any bigger in size than the previous ones, but now I'm going to be playing with my ice mountains first, because I need ice dwarves. Anyone who follows my bacon campaign will know that I have ice elves, so why not ice dwarves? And I want this. This is a land of extremes, I think. We've got... we're going to have lots of ice, so that those dwarves have got something to do. But the mountains, I think, need to really feel big and foreboding and dangerous, and the jungles need to be dense and equally foreboding and oh, do we really want, do we have to go there type of thing. So in terms of wildlife, we know about the Baluvian skywall. We'll have the usual stuff. You've always got to have the usual stuff. And the reason for that is, unless you're going to go and write your own monsters manual, players are going to expect that there will be an elephant or a bear or a wyvern, those kinds of creatures, just because that's what's in the book. And they're going to access those if they are a druid or... they are going to access them. So you have to assume that those creatures are going to be there, and if they're not there, I think you need to have a monsters compendium that your players can access easily, and adjust their mindset somewhat. I think it's also important to question: do you really need to go that? Whoops. Do you really need to go that far in terms of your world building? Do you in terms of creating completely new species of animals? I think if you're doing science fiction, absolutely, that is something that you need to do. But again, though, keeping it's like a this or it's like a that, I think is more valuable. And it's going to happen anyway, because we need a common point of reference. And unfortunately, our common point of reference happens to be planet Earth. So if David Attenborough hasn't spoken about it, we don't know about it, type of thing. Okay, so there are our mountains, and I think that this automatically feels very, very different from the scorched surface directly above them. I try to drop some mountains here and there on land masses and things. I don't, on the islands and things. I didn't want the islands to be completely devoid of it, but I also didn't want to do too many as well. Again, because it could have been a plain that shattered, and then there aren't any mountains on that plain. You also don't have any subduction zones, so in terms of continental drift and stuff, so new mountains won't necessarily be being made. The tectonic activity just isn't there to support them. So One of the things that I didn't do this time around, which I realized I think was a mistake, was that I didn't fix my coastlines as I dropped the mountains in. So it's not a precise art where you land your mountain, and so that can cause mountains to sort of create new coastline. And I like it when they do create new coastline, because what I've created is not necessarily as interesting a shape as when a randomly dropped mountain suddenly forces me to create a sort of a protuberance to accommodate for this lack of mountain. Now I'm going to just work quickly down and just fill in the gaps. Oh, wrong one. Especially down here. And you could argue, oh, these taper off into the ocean. Yes, you could say that, but we don't have to say that, so let's not. What was once an island now merges to become a peninsula. Now at the moment it looks like, oh, there's a little coastline there. Oh, you could probably swim that. Well, yes, except that that little coastline is actually a 1,000-foot plummet to the sphere below. We need to come up with a name. So we have the solar sphere for the sun-filled zone directly above this one. This one, I don't know what we should call this one actually. Oh, I'm having difficulty getting rid of that funny shape. I don't know what we should call this layer. Solar sphere because of the sun. Terrasphere for this one. That's pretty awesome, I think, from a tone setting. So we have the terrasphere, and then the terrasphere leads you down into the subsphere. The subsphere, subsphere is okay. I don't have a problem with it, but it's not as cool as terrasphere. What else do we use? What word do we use to describe underground? The undersphere? Undersphere could work. It's descriptive, it's derogatory to a degree. The undersphere? Yeah, I think we're going to call it the solar sphere, the terrasphere, and the undersphere. I think that works well for me. So I'm going to stick with that. I think that's quite cool. Hopefully I can remember it long enough to be able to include it. Well, you're no longer an island. Congratulations. And neither are you. Congratulations on your new mainland status. No Brexit for you. You are now part of the grand mass. No, wrong one. Here we go. Undersphere, solar sphere, terrasphere. Great. Right, I think we're good. Okie dokes, we're good. So colouring wise, it's pretty much dense jungle where it's not mountain. So I'm going to use these two palettes to indicate that. I'll come in obviously and tweak it and shake it around and make it look better. But I want a very strong colour contrast as well to that yellow layer, just because we are really trying to make them feel as if they're two very different spaces. My back button on my mouse trying to trigger this. causing this to disappear. That make me rather unhappy. Right, and then we need the snow. So that's the green. I just sort of dropped the green in so we get a sense of where we are. And then the snow is just going to come in. The brush is too big, actually. Make it half the size. And what I like about Incarnate is the way that it sort of feathers out the effect. So it's not adding huge amounts of snow. It won't paint on the actual mountains themselves. There's a different layer, but it fills in the blanks enough, in my opinion, that these feel like snowdrift covered mountains. Maybe it's just me, but I really like the effect, as opposed to the mountains that don't get snow in there. I think our snow dwarves are going to have a lot of fun in these mountain ranges. They, of course, I think they need to have a mortal enemy. Remember, it's about perseverance. That's the theme that I'm trying to establish within the game. So the dwarves need to persevere against an enemy. There needs to be something else that's in those mountains with them. I don't know why you got snow. You shouldn't have got snow. There's something else in those mountains with the dwarves that will oppose them, that the dwarves will have to struggle against. And for me, immediately what I start to think of is some kind of hairy, furry enemy. And I can think of maybe minotaurs could be fighting, although minotaurs generally are considered very sort of labyrinthian type creatures, aren't they? But I think minotaurs within the mountains could be quite dramatic, and I think that's what they're going to be fighting against. There's also that wonderful height discrepancy between the massive minotaurs and the diminutive dwarves. I think that could be interesting to explore as a narrative as well. All right, so now we're going to add in some lighting of that grass. And again, I'm not too phased about being if I erase something that I've done previously, it doesn't kill me. It's not. I don't have to go back and go, oh no, I've got to add back that snow. That's not how I work with Incarnate, and I don't think that's what they sort of intended it for either. This feather option is just so nice. It just blends in your different terrains and just creates this wonderful color depth. I think to try and be too specific with it is wasting the power of the coding that they've put in with it. And just in case you're wondering, they haven't paid me to do anything. The closest that they gave me the copy to use. I just rant about it because I think it's a really powerful tool, and I think I do enjoy drawing maps by hand, and there are tutorials on the channel on how to do that and how it takes so long. At the same time, though, I think it's horses for courses. You've got to recognize that, right, well, in this case, I've got a month, and not even a full month, to get ready for this campaign that will be run with very experienced GMs. They are they're some of the best GMs that I know of. They've all got channels on how to be basically a great GM. So, these are people who take this hobby very, very seriously, and I think most of them actually are full-time providing gaming advice. So the pressure to produce something that they can look at and go, yeah, all right, okay, that's kind of borderline acceptable for someone in our space, I think. I think you have to sort of go, okay, well, I could do hand-drawn, yes, but this looks prettier, immediately looks prettier, in my opinion, and does exactly what I needed to do. And it is quick. It's not incredibly laborious like those hand-drawn maps that I did. Those hand-drawn maps, I knew that I was going to need to do multiple maps to convey this idea of the floating planet, floating rocks type environment. I knew that that was going to happen, and so I needed a solution that was going to work quickly, still look good, and that just happens to be this one. Now, I do think I'm going to have to look quite closely at creating some custom backgrounds for this campaign. And, you know, we're running Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and say what you like, the idea of backgrounds supplementing the character build, I think in this kind of instance, where I've got this world and the people who live here are going to have certain skills, you know, there's an expectation that they're going to be used to the idea of navigating these very bizarre environments. So those are skills such as, say, for example, survival. I think almost everyone will have a fairly, not good survival, but will have survival as a base skill. It's like, it's just something that you do. To give a very strong analogy, I'm in Japan at the moment. I've come from South Africa. In South Africa, having a driver's license is, for most people, mandatory. It's not even a question of do you have one? It's a question of when does it expire, so that we can make sure that it doesn't expire before you get your next one. Whereas, say, in Japan, you have a driver's license. What on earth do you need that for? As most people don't drive. They don't need to. The public transport system is efficient. It's good. It does exactly what it needs to. And so it's a different skill set. So when you look at someone from South Africa versus someone from Japan, automatically there is this sense that, right, South Africans will probably be able to drive, whereas the Japanese probably won't be able to drive. So that's a background, really, isn't it? That's how you would express that in Dungeons and Dragons, is that would be a background that's now being applied to the character, and that background would be South African, and suddenly you've got, well, bingo, they know how to drive, or barbecue, or whatever, you know, however you might want to define your races. So I think I'm going to have to do some here, and again, it's just a time issue of, okay, we've got to do that. How much time do we have? Okay, we've got a month, we've got a week, or whatever. Okay, good. Let's capitalize, or let's panic. Right, so populating trees. Whether you're doing it by hand or whether you're using a computer, it's still a process that you just have to go through. Like I said, I want lots of jungle. I want this place to feel like you're in one giant humid mosquito trap. I will have some areas that don't have jungle in them, like this sort of central area. I'm going to have jungle around it, and we'll do it there as well. You know, so it might be where land clearance has taken place on an industrial scale. But you can also see why building empires would be quite difficult. How would you patrol these empires? How would you make sure that, you know, tithes and taxes are being done correctly? You'd be sailing backwards and forwards all the time, and sort of relying on your local governors to remain in line. I suppose the British did it when they were controlling the Caribbean, and, well, their vast dominion, as a matter of fact. I can still imagine that those being quite difficult, quite labor intensive. Would that happen in a medieval environment? I think more so, because you've got the ability to have all this labor at your disposal, and slavery and those sort of things are not uncommon, I suppose. I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. So it is something that yeah, could be there, but I don't think so. That's the bottom line. Is there any problem with more landmass? More landmass means more sort of work from a population perspective. I'm working at 28%. It's not exactly the same scale as down below, but or sorry, this, what do we call it? The solar sphere. Not the same scale as the solar sphere, I know, but these trees have got everything that trees want: shade, water. It's just a tree's paradise, really. So, and it is an interesting question because these islands float. We don't have a pole. You know, there's no, this is the North Pole, this is the South Pole. It's just however the islands happen to rotate through. You might, yeah. So the seasons, I suppose, would be more along those lines of, oh, we're going in it's a polarly wind. That's what it is. We'll cross over the poles for a couple of days where it'll be freezing cold, and the ice will expand down for a few days, and then the winds will blow, and you know we'll drift down south towards the equator, I suppose, is how it would work. Kind of makes sense in my head. I don't know. Climatologists might be freaking out, going, "No, that's not how it works. It won't do that. It'll do this." Or, wow, magic. That's my excuse. I have magic. What do you have? Logic. Yep, you do. That's great. I think this is really looking quite different from that surface map, and I really haven't differentiated the biomes. You know, there's ice mountain, there's jungle, there's desert. Sorry, there's jungle, there's plains, but I haven't really pushed it in terms of maybe what I'm going to do after the trees. I think I will do that, is because it is something that I associate with jungle. Is, you know, we've always got to work around expectation. What do you expect? So when I say jungle planet, we think Dagobah. Perhaps maybe not even as far as Dagobah, because Dagobah I would classify as a swamp planet more than anything else. We only got to see one little sort of portion of it. There might be some lovely tropical beaches that Yoda would take a holiday, you know, to, and go and tan and relax and lose his luggage and that sort of thing. You know, it's entirely possible. But when you're doing a map, you have to cater to that sort of expectation as well. And yeah, jungles to me speak quite highly, quite probably of swamp area. I mean, I certainly think of the Amazon as having swamp component to its jungleness. And players will be doing the same thing, so you want to give them that. So again, it's about that familiarity, isn't it? We've been there with David, so you know, David Attenborough on his quests to tell us all about the natural world, which are wonderful. But we now expect to see that, so we need to feed that whenever we can. All right, this is just adding such a wonderful little texturing to the map. I like it. I, 'cause, 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 ' It hasn't taken too long. It takes about an hour a map, give or take. I could probably do them faster if I was really focusing, but what's the fun in that? I mean, it's about sort of. Normally, I'd have music going and probably go even slower, actually. But the thought processes are still exactly the same. Work it out, play it out, think about what's going to live here. So we know we've got the Minotaurs in the mountains with the Dwarves. I think that's such a fun idea. We've got lizard folk, Aztec sacrifices going on in the actual jungle regions. We didn't really conclude on the gnomes. We've got the ice mining dwarves, which I do like. Yeah, we never really concluded what to do with the gnomes. Maybe they're just nomadic gnomes. There's a certain ring to it, isn't there? So maybe these nomadic gnomes just wander around and they're sort of gypsy-like, perhaps. Oh, there we go. They can sort of have hot air balloons and wander around. Now, who do they fight? Who is their adversary? To create the sense that they persevere against all odds. I immediately my gut reaction was to say goblins. That fly in goblin-esque airships, which are perhaps Beluvian skywheel bladders that have been inflated and stretched over rough canvas. They are as predatory as the gnomes are migratory, perhaps. I think that could be quite fun. I know it's a bit of a cliche to have these goblins flying around and these contraptions, but it just works on a level I would expect. You know, we're flying, okay, great, what can attack us out here? Well, we can get harpies and that sort of thing, but we can also get the goblin tribes, you know, the nomadic goblin tribes. They float around, they don't ever settle down. They're just constantly a threat, that sort of sail through the air and attack from above or below, and they possibly live in the caves on the underside of the landmass. So that is something that I wanted to speak about, which I forgot about, is that we're not dealing with a two-dimensional landmass anymore. There is now a very real option of having an entire nation living on the underside of the mountains, and I think that's where our gnomes are. I think I like that idea more than the idea of them being in hot air balloons. The hot air balloons idea is not bad. I don't think there is ever such a thing as a bad idea. I just think that if we put the gnomes hanging on the underside, it creates it's a very different role-playing space, isn't it? Because now you've got these cities that hang underneath the mountains, underneath these floating islands, and your battle scenarios are now on these rope and wooden bridges that span between these inverse towers. They go down towards the layer below. It's the inverse of a skyscraper. I think that could be quite dramatic, quite interesting. So I'm quite happy to put the gnomes there. Perhaps the halflings can become nomadic. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the small races. So if players don't play them, then they're just going to cease to exist. In my world, I'm the same against Ewoks as well. So don't take it as just gnomes or halflings. It's all the diminutives. So, all right. So we've got gnomes and goblins, and the reason why the goblins are a threat is because they drop down onto ships. The hot air balloons and skywheels that's floating downwards. You suddenly have these goblins cabling down from their arboreal, their subterranean arboreal environment. I don't even know how to describe it, but I think that could work quite nicely. So we won't get goblins. We won't get too many goblins up in the solar sphere, simply because there's nothing for them to drop down onto. That's sort of their modus operandi. It's very hot up there. Not that the goblins mind that. We might put kobolds up that area. I did a video on kobolds where I decided my kobolds are cold-blooded, and so they like warm spaces. So we'll have kobolds and orcs living on the surface and the solar sphere. Then as you come down, you get goblins and gnomes living on the undersides of these mountains, these floating islands, and then you have the actual humans themselves. I think humans will just live everywhere. That's like the trope of humanity, isn't it? And I think it's almost a defining characteristic. And if we ever make contact with aliens, I think it's going to be so interesting to see if the aliens go, wow, you really are a resourceful, highly skillable, adaptable race. You really do have some different thinking. Or if they go, no, we're exactly the same. We have 6 arms. We adapted. We learned. We did exactly what you do. We thrive. We don't give up. We have all the same survival instincts that you have. You're not unique in those sort of senses, because that's really what sort of the stereotyping in fantasy does, is the human is the status quo and everything else is the different one. Right, so we've got that. Where have I not worked? Still so much to go. This is really taking a lot of time, but I think it's looking stunning. I think it's really going to look great. After this we do swamps, and then we drop in our cities, and then we're done with the terrasphere. Okay, so our jungles are now in, looking quite prolific almost everywhere, I think. Maybe a little bit mangy as far as jungles are concerned, but it gives definitely the impression, anyway, that there's lots of jungle out there. And if you think each one of these is a very sizable landmass, this is just an overview. So these can be quite extensive jungles. Now we're going to add in the swamps, because we established that that's something that we think should definitely be there, just as something that we expect almost. So I'm going to use this one. No, that's the one that I used for there, so I can't use that one. Can't use that one. Swamps, what about this one? Yeah, alright, we'll use that for... Oh, the swamp textures are quite yellow. They're quite yellow. This one? Yeah, that'll work. Alright, so we're going to have a swamp there. We're going to have a swamp around here. Not a huge amount. I don't think swamps need to play a massive part. But if we get a feel for them here and there, I think that'll work out quite nicely. And the swamps, just give us another encounter space that our players can experience and go into. All right, so that's enough for me. I don't think we need more than that. These are the big ones. Now, obviously, the other thing to bear in mind is that this is a... That's a swamp. That's too small. This is... Yeah, I'm not buying that. This is continental scale, so I could, I'm not going to, I could go in much closer to each landmass and redraw it, recreate it to being a bigger scale, and then add in more features which I just haven't needed to add in at this level. And I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. I don't think anyone would sort of jump up and down and say, well, you know, obviously you make sure that the mountain ranges are still roughly where they were, but there could be smaller ones within here, without breaking the illusion of the setting. I don't think people would mind too much, and if they did, I think it's. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm advocating, oh, well, you can just sort of redraw your entire map and bugger the big picture. I'm not saying that. It's about a balance and being able to say, well, yeah, look, we've got this bay, but this bay has actually got multiple little river sources. Now, that is something that I'm very conscious of, that I haven't added in here, and I've been debating it quietly in my head. Is it something that needs to be added or not? Do I need to add in rivers? And I'm going, well, maybe a river or two would help. But then on the other hand, by not having rivers, doesn't that sort of emphasize the fact that there isn't a great abundance of water? There isn't this, oh, well, we can just go and get it. So I'm not saying that water is going to be a focus within the campaign. I do think, though, that up on the surface, water will be a tradable commerce, whereas down here, it won't have very much value, aside from the actual sort of nutritional value. But yeah, the idea is that there needs to be a differentiation and different needs. Did I completely miss these mountains? Yes, look at that. Look at that. How embarrassing. See, it always pays to go back and check your work. You've just become swamps. Right. Okay. Now I think we're good, and we'll probably find mistakes later on. Or you're probably screaming at me going, no, there's a mistake, there's a mistake, there's a mistake. Anyway. All right, so we're going to place our buildings now, and we're going to stick to the same scale. We need to decide on structure look for this area. And here we're going to go with, I think, something that's a bit more representative of the types of cultures that we have here. So I'm going to choose, I think this one looks quite well. This one, no, this one, no, this one. I like this one. All right, and you can tell me whether you do too or not. So I'm going to zoom in, not necessarily to 300%, so that I can see land distribution, and I'm going to say, right, we're going to put, we are at our smallest scale, so we're going to put a building there, we're going to put one there, we're going to put one there, definitely one there, we'll put them on the edge of the swamp town. One there. With this proliferation of jungles and landmass and water, there should be an expectation of there being more cities, more structures, taking advantage of that terrain and that space and that abundance. So I don't have a problem sort of plopping down a lot. Now, a lot of cities usually get built on the coast because there's access to fishing, there's trade options, those kinds of things. So I'm basically just following that same idea. Generally speaking, cities are built on rivers as well, because that's where you get your fresh water from. Well, we don't have any rivers quite literally floating around, so we're not going to go too far inland. You'd have to rely on rain, and although that's entirely possible, it's safer not to have to rely on the sky to drop stuff on you, because usually it's a goblin. Right, so I quite like the fact I like the idea of the goblins being these sort of droppable creatures. I think the goblins are going to have those leathery wing packs so they can drop and glide if they miss, because otherwise they would have a very small population. And I can think of nothing more terrifying than being on a very slow-moving Boluvian skywall and having 100 goblins drop off from the cliff face above you and start screaming down towards you, like these parabat monsters from hell. I am aware that the kobolds have the Erd race, which is the winged kobolds, but I like the idea of drop goblins. I just do. Alright, I think we are done. Could there be another city there? No. Yes. Yes, there could. It's prime land. I don't see why they shouldn't set up a city. Alright. So we've got cities dotted around, sort of controlling the territory. Okay. So that's it. We're done for this surface. We've got snow, we've got jungle, we've got plains, we've got swamps, and of course we have our big open sky. I don't think we need any deserts because, again, you know, an island drifts over the top and suddenly the island beneath it is in shade for 6 months. You're not going to get constant exposure anywhere. We've got our major cities. The smaller cities, of course, those will pop up as needed. And sometimes I don't like defining villages and towns and things on maps, certainly of this scale, because it allows me to add them in as I feel I need to whilst telling the story. So there we go, level 2 done. Let's save that. And thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you did like the episode. Hit the subscribe button if these are the kinds of shows that you think we should be doing on the channel. We're constantly testing ourselves, making sure that we're giving you what you want to see, what you can use and have value from in your own games. And there's only one way to know that, and that's through the subscriptions or through the comments. Leave a comment below. What do you think? What did I mistake? What did I not do correctly? What did I do correctly? What are your thoughts on drop goblins, on the terrasphere, and all of that kind of stuff? It's interesting to get feedback and compare notes and see how we would have done it differently. Of course, that's the wonderful nature of our hobby, isn't it? Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.